Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us on this, our very first virtual conference called The Future of Everything. And this is a very special one because we're having, and I'm pretty sure that you already know him, Jason Silva. And the topic today would be, what is the future of everything? Technology is upending the world. Acceleration is the new normal. Disruption has gone mainstream. There's a sense of vertigo and disorientation. Jobs may become obsolete. Artificial intelligence is superseding human capacities. Pandemics are wreaking havoc. Biology is becoming a programmable medium. And anxiety is running high. Mental health is in turmoil. These are mind-blowing transformations, and humans don't like change. How to respond? Well, that's why we're here, and that's what we're about to discover with Jason Silva. So a little bit about the speaker. Jason is a digital filmmaker and futurist. He's an Emmy-nominated host of National Geographic Channel's international hit TV series Brain Games, seen in over 161 countries for over 5 seasons. A Timothy Leary of the viral video age was how The Atlantic described television personality, filmmaker, and philosopher Silva, who has also been described as part Timothy Leary, part Ray Kurzweil, and part Neo from The Matrix. Jason is the creator of the original series Shots of Awe, short films exploring the human condition with topics ranging from creativity, technology, and innovation to imagination, consciousness, and much more. In short, philosophy, science, and art for the millennial generation. So Geneva Business School is proud and happy and honored to introduce you all to Jason Silva. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the session.
Hello, and a very, very good day to Geneva Business School students and community. Can you guys hear me okay? Can you confirm I'm loud and clear?
Yes, you're loud and clear.
Excellent, guys. Well, thank you so much, Eduardo, for that wonderful introduction. And hello, everyone. It's really great to be here with you guys. I know it would be nice to be together in person, high-fiving each other and experiencing each other's energy in the flesh, but these are strange times. And so strange times call for creativity and innovation. That's kind of the human story and the human condition. We get creative when there are obstacles to overcome. We get creative when there are difficulties to be transcended. And this will be a recurring theme in my remarks today. So consider the fact that we're doing this virtually as very much a metaphor for the ways in which human beings have to become imaginative when there are problems to be solved. That is really the human story. So a little about me. My name is Jason Silva. I was born in Caracas, Venezuela, and I am known around the world for the most part as the host of National Geographic's Brain Games. Brain Games is a television series that I hosted for 5 seasons, and it was a show that was very, very, very popular because it looked at all the ways in which the human brain perceives reality, constructs reality, distorts reality. And so the hallmark of the show was that we highlighted all the ways in which we perceived and misperceived the world. And that made for a very entertaining television show. But even though, yes, it was entertaining, it was also philosophically very profound because it constantly showed people that your experience of the world is never truly objective and is often full of mistakes and errors. We often misperceive reality. And because our reality is coupled to our perception, we all are trapped in a kind of matrix of expectation and cognitive bias and cognitive loopholes and so on and so forth. And so you don't see the world as it is, you see the world as you are. So we all have this distorted perception of the world, and our biases and cognitive loopholes, again, distort our experience of reality. That's a very profound thing. And it was a very profound takeaway from Brain Games. And I want you to hold that metaphor in mind as I take you on a journey today, because the fact that we don't see reality objectively is something we should take stock of when we are finding ourselves in a situation of anxiety, panic, uncertainty, and distress, which characterizes a lot of the world in the last 2 months. So just hold that in mind, because my hope today is to invite you to see the world differently and to see what's been happening through a different lens. And that's really my invitation to you guys today. So if everyone's ready, we will proceed. Now, I'm aware, as you are, that we live in very tricky times. We are undergoing a massive disruption to our daily lives. What COVID-19 has done to the world is a humbling experience, in which a disruption of such massive scale has fundamentally put the planet on its knees. I mean, the impossible and unimaginable became reality within a matter of weeks, and 2 months in, we're only now starting to find our bearings again and come out of this surrealistic nightmare. But what happened with COVID and the pace at which it went global, and the anxiety, uncertainty, and hysteria that accompanied the spread of this virus also went viral. You know, two things happened at once: a virus spread, and then the anxiety around the implications of this virus spreading also went viral. Fear also went viral, and it played a huge role in bringing the world to its knees. In the midst of panic, we made a lot of decisions that now are being hotly debated, the lockdowns, of course, being the main example. But I want to take your mind temporarily off COVID, and I want you to zoom out, and I want you to think in more deep time terms, because I want to paint a story of humanity that shows where we began and where we've arrived, to give better context to how we might go from where we are into the very near future. So this is a story that starts with the power of human imagination and human creativity. I am immensely passionate about human imagination. I am immensely passionate about human creativity. And this has turned into a passion for technology and innovation. The reason for that is that I believe that technology is the embodiment of human creativity in the world. I believe that technology and innovation are the literalization of human imagination in the world. I believe that technology is how we turn the human mind inside out, right? How we impregnate the world with mind, right? Technology is how we literally impregnate the world with mind and imagination. The cognitive philosophers, David Chalmers and Andy Clark, they wrote a seminal paper called The Extended Mind Thesis. I highly recommend it. And in the Extended Mind Thesis, they basically make the argument that technology is like a scaffolding of the mind that we use to extend our thoughts, our reach, and our vision. And it has always been so. If you go back 100,000 years to the savannas of Africa, when early humans first picked up a stick on the ground, right? And we used that stick to reach a fruit that was hanging off a high tree branch. Since then, we've been using our sticks, our tools, our instruments to extend our reach, to extend our agency, to transcend our limits, right? So that has always been the human story. We create a tool, and then we use that tool to extend our will and our reach. That is how we have continuously overcome and redefined our boundaries. Technology is our second skin. Technology is our exoskeleton. Technology is the exteriorization of human imagination and an extension, a redefinition of our skin and of our boundaries. So that's the historical context that we're dealing with, right? And today is a very different game. Technology has always changed the world, but today it feels like, well, it feels like the rug is being pulled from underneath our feet. Disruption has become the new normal. We're constantly getting sidelined by new innovations and new startups and new business models that make the old business models obsolete. We're living in the age of change. But the question is, why? If technology has always changed the world, right? If tools and technologies have always disrupted the status quo, why does it feel so different today? Well, this has to do with the fact that technology changes at an exponential rate. And everybody now is familiar with the word exponential because of the spread of COVID and the spread of fear exponentially, but most people still don't know what exactly exponential change is. But it's really the reason that today things change the way they change, and back in the day, they didn't really change so fast. Because back in the day, technological innovations like the wheel or harnessing electricity or the creation of the car, all of these things, fire for cooking, these were all innovations that completely transformed humanity. They completely upended society. They radically disrupted the world. But these technologies used to emerge over multiple generations. So back in the day, the world didn't seem to change very fast because most people were born into a world and then they died in a world that didn't see that many changes. They maybe saw one radical innovation in their lifetimes. So, it wasn't so disruptive because you were born and then you died and not much changed. It was the next generation that would then see the changes that accrued. But that's very different from where we are today. Today, the changes again are happening at an exponential rate. And it's very important for you guys to understand the difference between linear change and exponential change, between change that used to happen over many generations and changes that are happening within one generation. There's that Lenin quote that says there are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks when decades happen. So, what's the difference between linear change and exponential change? There's a great example used by Ray Kurzweil. Ray Kurzweil is the head of engineering at Google. He is considered by Bill Gates the greatest mind alive at predicting the future. And he uses a wonderful example to very quickly wrap your heads around the difference between linear change and exponential change. It's called the 30 steps example, all right? If you take 30 linear steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you get to 30, right? That's normal. That's linear change. 30 linear steps gets you to 30. But if you were to take the same amount of steps exponentially, 2, 4, 16, by step 30, you're at 1 billion. This is exponential change, and this is what you have to wrap your heads around. The human brain is wired to think linearly. Our intuition about change is linear, but technological change is exponential. This creates a serious cognitive dissonance, because when we think about 30 steps, I take 30 steps, I get to 30. But when technology takes 30 steps exponentially, in 30 steps, you get to 1 billion. That's the reason that the smartphone in your pocket today is 1 million times cheaper, 1 million times smaller, and 1,000 times more powerful than what used to be a $60 million supercomputer that was half a building in size 40 years ago. Just try to process that for a moment, right? The smartphone in your pocket is 1 million times cheaper, 1 million times smaller, and 1,000 times more powerful than what used to be a supercomputer that was half a building in size and cost $40 million 40 years ago. That's exponential change. Exponential technological change is what has allowed the supercomputer of yesterday to fit in the palm of your hand. Exponential technological change is the reason that a young kid in Africa with a smartphone has better communications technology than a president, than a head of state had 25 years ago. That's the reason that Geneva Business School students with their smartphones, again, are better equipped with better supercomputers than presidents were 25 years ago. So the tools to change the world are now in everybody's hands. The tools to transform the planet are now in everybody's hands. The opportunity for social impact, innovation, creativity, massive disruption of the good kind is now in everybody's hands. Your imagination is superpowered. You have booster rockets for your imagination, thanks to the exponential technology of something as simple as a smartphone in your pocket. A way of thinking about it is to consider some ideas by the philosopher, or rather the writer, Stephen Johnson. Stephen Johnson wrote a book where good ideas come from, a natural history of innovation. And in the book, he introduces the concept of the adjacent possible. This is a concept that I love. He says the adjacent possible is like a shadow from the future that hovers over the present, like a map of all the ways in which the present can reinvent itself. So my invitation to you guys, as you consider the problems of the world and also the creativity and innovation in the world, consider it through the lens of the adjacent possible. Think exponentially and consider it through the lens of the adjacent possible, right? Not just what is, but what could be, right? How can I transform the world using the tools in my pocket? How does exponential technology allows me to imagine a world in the future that is beyond my lenses of perception, right? Because the same exponential tech that shrunk down a $40 million supercomputer that was half a building in size to the smartphone in your pocket is continuing. So in the next 25 years, the smartphone in your pocket will shrink down to a blood cell sized device in our bodies and brains. Elon Musk is already working on it. It's called the Neuralink. Believe me, exponential change means continuing miniaturization. It means smarter, better, exponentially more powerful microprocessing technology that gets ever smaller and more miniaturized until it goes inside our bodies. And then we'll become cyborgs, even though we already are cyborgs. But the point being that our ever advancing information digital technology will continue to up-level the capacity for humans to exteriorize their imagination and their creativity. And as Elizabeth Gilbert recently said in a podcast, there's only two things that we have found that have no limits because we haven't found the edges of them. One is the universe, which we haven't found the edge of. And two is human imagination, because we haven't found the edge of it. So hold that in mind as I prepare now to play a special video for you. And Eduardo, if you can start setting that up. So I have been thinking about exponential technology for 8 years. I realized when I understood the implications of the speed of change that human beings eventually were going to be able to transcend all of our limitations. Anything that we ever thought could hold us back could be easily overcome thanks to exponential tech. And I wanted to put this message out into the world in a way that would inspire people. I wanted to make videos, to make content that would excite young people to think about technology differently. I wanted to provide an antidote to the doom and gloom, or to the jadedness, or to the fatalism that so many people have, by offering them a view of the world, of society, of humanity, of technology, that pointed the way towards actualizing human imagination, literally. So I started doing these videos on YouTube, and many of them went viral and grew to a worldwide audience. And the first video that I want to show you, as you can see, Eduardo is setting it up. It's called "To Be Human is to Be Transhuman." And so it's a celebration pretty much of everything I've been saying so far, but condensed into 3 minutes and with the emotion of a movie trailer. So here's the first video. Please have a look, and then we will continue.
So there's a great line by Shakespeare in which he says, "We know what we are, we know not what we may be." And in the age of accelerating technologies in which we extend the cognitive reach of our minds, the perimeters of our humanness with these extensions of self, these exoskeletons, these technological scaffoldings, you know, the wings of our aircrafts and the signals traveling through our smartphones, sending our thoughts electrified at the speed of light across oceans of sky, we redefine and extend what it means to be human. Edward O. Wilson says, we have actually decommissioned natural selection, and now we must look deep within ourselves and decide what we wish to become. We are now the chief agents of evolution. We have reversed engineered the software of biology, and are about to rewire and upgrade and redefine what it is to be a Homo sapien. Juan Enriquez uses the term Homo evolutus, the being that evolves itself, that transforms itself, right? Ray Kurzweil, we didn't stay in the caves. We haven't stayed on the planet. Biology, just another membrane to be transcended. You know, Marvin Minsky used to say, will robots inherit the earth? Yes, they will, but they will be our children. You know, I love this idea because we hear the term transhumanism, and what it means to be human is to be transhuman. We are the species that transforms and transcends. We never stopped. We always did. It's what we are.
So I'll just be, okay, I'm back on the screen. So there you go, guys. That video, you know, as you can see, the tone and the emotion is quite intense, because my invitation is to reach people's hearts, not just their brains. You know, when I think about human possibility, when I think about human potential, I don't have to really stretch myself too much, because there's so many examples already about ways in which we have overcome ourselves and overcome our limits that seem indistinguishable from magic. Arthur C. Clarke, he famously said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And this is true from the fact that I'm in California speaking into a device made of plastic and metal with no moving parts. And I'm sharing my thoughts that go from my imagination into little noises and vibrations out of my mouth, absorbed by this smartphone, beamed across the planet and into your eyeballs, all because the naked ape, which is us, didn't stay in the caves, didn't stay on the planet, and soon won't even stay within the limitations of biology. And that's the next section of my remarks today, because I've had the opportunity to travel the world, to speak to live audiences, presidents, heads of state, corporations, royalty, you name it. And I've spoken to these people about exponential tech and the future. And one of the things that audiences often tell me is, okay, yes, digital technology has evolved at this speed, and that's okay. That's believable, even though it's astonishing because we have seen it. You know, you've all seen the iPhone get twice as powerful and half as cheap every year. We've all seen the laptops get smaller and more powerful. So yes, exponential tech is going at that speed. But what audiences will sometimes ask me is, you know, what about biology and concrete? You know, we're still flesh and blood, and we still live in a world made of concrete. That can't change exponentially, they ask. Well, strap your seatbelts on, because now biology and the world of atoms and concrete are both becoming information technologies. Now, what that means is that they're both now subject to those same exponential speeds of change, innovation, manipulation, and transformation. Yeah, let's start with biology. You've probably heard of genetics, synthetic biology, programmable biology, gene sequencing. Well, biology is becoming an information technology known as biotechnology. Biotechnology means mastering the information processes of biology, because it turns out that biology is a language. Turns out we are alphabetic all the way down. Turns out DNA is code. Turns out our genes are software programs. And it turns out our capacity to program, reprogram biology is advancing exponentially now. Gene sequencing, just as one example, the speed at which we can sequence our genes is actually advancing 3 times faster than those exponential numbers I was talking to you about before. Try to wrap your heads around that. Take the COVID-19 example. You know, in less than 3 months, we decoded the genome of the virus, identified it, sent it to labs across the world, and in record time, we have over 100 vaccine candidates already. Think about the speed at which humanity has responded to that crisis. That's thanks to advances in biotechnology. But that's only the beginning. The physicist Freeman Dyson, he has written about a very near future where a new generation of artists will be writing genomes with the fluency that Blake and Byron and Shakespeare wrote verses. Think about that for a second. When biology becomes a language that we can program, then new generations of talented poets, engineers, artists will be writing with the language of biology. What kind of self-directed evolution will human beings speciate into when we can steer our own genetic destiny, when we can create programmable solutions to cancer, to illness, perhaps even to aging and death itself? There's a reason why Larry Page, co-founder of Google, started Calico, the California Life Extension Company, software company for biology. Their goal, according to a Time magazine cover story a few years ago, Google and the end of death. Silicon Valley billionaires are already like harnessing their imagination to see how they can use biotech to essentially hack the software of biology to make ourselves immortal. You want to know what the next $1 trillion startup space is going to be? It's not going to be Silicon Valley anymore. It's going to be Biology Valley, because biology will be the new space for entrepreneurship, for hackathons, for startup culture. The medical industry will be transformed and upended in the same way that digital technology disrupted so many industries in its path. That's the next crazy startup disruptive space. biology, medicine. These industries will be transformed, democratized, and up-leveled. The age of personalized medicine is upon us. Just to give you one example, the X Prize Foundation a couple years ago did a contest around the world, $10 million prize, to the first team around the world who could design what they call a medical tricorder. That is a smartphone-sized device that had what's called lab-on-a-chip technologies, essentially a medical laboratory on a chip in a phone. And that lab-on-a-chip technology in a medical tricorder, a smartphone-sized device, could be used in a rural village in Africa, for example, to diagnose people better than 10 board-certified doctors. So the idea being that you could put a hospital into a phone and take that phone to areas without hospitals to help people. That's the kind of innovation we're going to start to see in healthcare, thanks to advances in digital tech and biotech. And that's advancing exponentially. So that's biotech. Then I talked about the world of concrete that we still inhabit. So of course, concrete, like every other physical matter on the planet and in the universe, is made of atoms. And atoms are now becoming a programmable domain. There's the book, the seminal book on this technology is called Engines of Creation by Eric Drexler. And he introduced the world to nanotechnology, la nanotecnología. And nanotechnology, again, allows us to program and pattern atoms, which are the building blocks of the physical world, the same way that we program ones and zeros for digital technology. So then extend the metaphor, right? It means that the same way that with digital technology, we can create virtual worlds, with nanotechnology, we can program the physical world to behave like a virtual world. The physical world becomes a programmable medium. What will this lead to? Buildings that self-assemble, right? Nanobots in our bodies and brains that can repair us, right? A world that is beyond scarcity, because when you can move atoms around, you can turn dog shit into bananas. So we move into a world of abundance. Peter Diamandis and Stephen Kotler wrote a fantastic book on the subject called Abundance: Why the Future Will Be Better Than You Think. So this is where we're heading. Nanotechnology is advancing exponentially. Biotechnology is advancing exponentially. And of course, artificial intelligence and digital tech continues to advance exponentially. These three overlapping revolutions lead us to a world where mind and matter become one. And if Eduardo can start setting up the next video I want to show you is called The Future of Us, El Futuro de Nosotros. And it tries to take the wild implications of biotech, nanotech, and AI and turn it into something that is emotional, like a song. So let's just give Eduardo here a couple of seconds to set up the next video, The Future of Us, that I'm excited to show you guys today. So we can see it now on the screen. I think Eduardo's ready. Let's hear The Future of Us.
So let's talk about the future of us. What does that even mean? The future of us. It's a look at what comes next. It's a look at what might be. Because today, exponentially emerging technologies are transforming what's possible. They are helping us overcome, transcend even biological limitations. The very rules of what it is to be human are up for grabs. We're rewriting the software of life with biotechnology. We're turning matter into a programmable medium with nanotechnology. We're creating sentient minds with artificial intelligence that are not bound by the limitations of biology. These three overlapping revolutions, GNR, genetics, nanotechnology, and robotics, together will be leveraged to lead us towards a black hole-like
impossible to fathom singularity. It's like staring into the sun, a moment of a rousing symphonic climax when all of mind, leveraged and networked together, transcends its biological origins and we become something more. People worry about the AIs and the them. Well, as Kurzweil says, that's going to be us. The future of us is ours to dream up.
Hey, are we back?
Yep, you're back.
Can you see me?
Nope.
It says that I'm on safe driving mode for some reason. My video is stopped. Let me try it. How do I fix this?
I'm gonna fix it for you.
I'll let everybody just sit with that video for a moment. Okay, perfect.
There you go. There you go. We can see you, and we can hear you.
You can see me.
Yep.
Okay, great. So, as you can see, guys, the future is going to be pretty crazy, but it's not so crazy if you just extend that sense of wonderment or that sense of implausibility that sometimes people get when they imagine, oh my God, programmable biology, that sounds impossible, or buildings that self-assemble, that sounds impossible. Well, if I was to go back 100,000 years and show native humans a jet engine or a 747 aircraft or an iPhone, that would be as implausible and astonishing and absolutely miraculous as the idea of us creating programmable biology, immortality, downloadable consciousness is to us. So before you resist a world that just sounds too far-fetched, consider exponential technology, which I've already walked you through and explained, and consider how what we take for granted today would seem to our ancestors. Hopefully that thought experiment is enough to make you realize that what seems impossible is actually inevitable. And if it's inevitable, then what we should do if we want to be active participants and co-creators of the future is to start thinking exponentially. We must transcend the been there's and seen that's of the adult mind. We must move past our cognitive frameworks. We must be willing to see the world as if through the eyes of a child. We must believe that anything is possible. Now, why does this matter? It's not just about geeking out on how exciting this future is going to be, but it's also about social impact, right? It's about empowering humans. It's about how quickly human beings can transcend COVID-19, whether it's with a vaccine or basic social distancing or other innovations we can't even imagine. It's about not succumbing to despair, not letting ourselves be seduced into fatalism, not be coerced into doom and gloom and panic and fear, but instead maintain and embrace an optimistic lens that takes into account that we have always transcended every limitation that has been put in front of us. Human beings went to the sky, went to the moon, doubled human lifespan, invented vaccines, invented the internet, transcend space and geography. Human beings are the creature that can. Human beings are the creature that will. And that's very important to remember. Now, the next video that I want to show you is precisely about social impact. And it took inspiration from a digital campaign to redefine what it means to be a billionaire. in the age of exponential technology. Because now that startup culture has taken over the planet, everyone wants to be the next Mark Zuckerberg. Everybody wants to, you know, create a new company that makes $1 billion and become a billionaire and so on and so forth. And so what we decided was, what if we rebrand the term billionaire? First Singularity University did it, then some other individuals. And so I decided to make a video about this topic. In the age of exponential technology, a billionaire is not somebody with $1 billion. In the age of exponential technology, a billionaire is somebody who positively touches 1 billion people. Now, sit with that for a second. Exponential technology means anybody with an idea, anybody who can code, anybody who can put a video on YouTube, any one of you potentially could create something, could put a message out, could make an app, could do something that positively touches 1 billion lives. That should be the new metric for billionaire. Touch 1 billion lives, then you're a billionaire. So if Eduardo, you can set up the next video. It's called The Captains of Spaceship Earth, because that's us. We are the captains of Spaceship Earth. And we're gonna play the next video. The next video was shot with a smartphone. And I am so excited for you guys to see what's possible to record with a device that fits in your pocket. So Eduardo, if you can hear me, and if you can please set up the third video, Captains of Spaceship Earth. And then let's hit play on it.
We live in a world of exponential technological advancement. What this literally means is that we have new construction kits for our reality, new tools with which to probe at the adjacent possible. So consider the implications, right? As Marshall McLuhan used to say, first we build the tools, and then the tools build us. We are designed by what we have designed. There are these feedback loops of mind, tool, and world that radically redefine our boundaries, that radically transform what it means to be human. To be human today is to crisscross the skies. To be human today is to create techno-social wormholes, mind-to-mind communication that overcomes the limits of time, space, and distance. And so what do? Well, we need to radically reach out to one another in ways that we haven't before. There's a great line that says empathy rarely extends beyond our line of sight. In other words, if it's out of sight, it is out of mind. But if anything, these wireless communication technologies are radically extending our line of sight. They're providing new ontological maps of the real. They're giving us the astronaut overview effect. We are seeing the big picture. We are seeing that we are the captains of Spaceship Earth. And what shall we do? We need to extend our hands to one another. We've never had such tools to overcome all of the limitations of our humanity. We have the power, we have the will, we have the capacity, the creative capacity to overcome our limits. And so today, billions of us linking to one another, creating a global node, a global brain. What is the new definition of billionaire? The new definition of billionaire is he who will positively affect the lives of 1 billion people. He or she who will reach out and say, I will positively affect the lives of 1 billion people. This should be our goal. This is our responsibility. Here's our chance.
All right, I'm back. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
I can hear you and I can see you.
All right. So as you can see, guys, I am very passionate about human possibility and human potential. And the reason is because I have no choice. You know, it's a little bit like whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't. Either way, you're right. Your cognitive frameworks, your sense of what is possible determines your actions in the world. If you think nothing is possible, then you won't do anything. You won't even try. And for better or worse, then nothing is possible for you. So my goal here is to invite you to let go of your linear lenses of perception and instead put on your exponential lenses of perception, to blast yourself open, to transcend your cognitive frameworks, to transcend the been there's and seen that's of the adult mind, to transcend whatever jadedness you might have accrued, and to embrace the sense that anything is possible. And we have the record, the track record to show it. So on that note, my invitation to you again is, don't see this dark moment of these last 2 months as a sign of things to come. See it as a blip in the radar. And if anything, see the speed at which we actually will come out of this experience and thrive as never before. So on that note, it's been about 45 minutes. So I'd like to open it up to a Q&A now to fill the rest of the session. So Eduardo, if you can assist me with that, I'd love to hear from the audience.
Yes, we have a couple of questions here. Can you hear me, Jason?
Yes.
Great. So from Giovanna Comia, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing the names. So it's asking, hi, Jason, any advice on financial stability? Love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, we all have basic needs. And so it's hard to have lofty goals for humanity if you're worried about paying your bills. For sure, Abraham Maslow, the psychologist, talked about the hierarchy of needs and how you need food, you need housing, you need self-esteem, you need all these things before you can aspire to like impact humanity. So economics, of course, are crucially important, and personal finances need to be, of course, addressed. And I understand that concern from everyone. Being from Venezuela, I know what an economic implosion can do to a people. So I have sympathy and appreciation for your question. You know, one thing that's being thrown around now by many intellectuals is universal basic income, because as exponential technologies continue to spread, there is a view that more and more things can be automated and done by robots or artificial intelligence. And so there will be a lot less need for a lot of our jobs, right? Because, you know, if a robot can do it cheaper, then why do you need the human? And so people are worried, rightly so, about their jobs disappearing. Yuval Harari, who wrote *Sapiens*, he is somebody who has talked about universal basic income as potentially a solution for this, that eventually governments just realize, okay, like people have to just have their basic needs met because they're not really needed in the labor force. But then the question is, well, what will people do with themselves? And what he says is, well, most of us will just be creative. We'll spend our time in virtual reality. We'll do things out of passion rather than out of economic need. I'm not an expert in universal basic income, but I certainly like the idea that people's work and their passion might become one if we live in a world where we don't have to work to live, but instead we can live to work and do the work we love. So that's what I would say. Thanks for your question.
Fantastic. Next question is from Dasha Ripa. What if we are not ready for such a rapid technological expansion?
It's a fair question. We certainly aren't biologically programmed to think exponentially. We are programmed to think linearly. And that's the reason why I can give this speech 1,000 times, but people are still surprised when something exponential happens and an industry is disrupted. And that's something that we have to intellectually and emotionally move past. We have to realize where our limitations, our cognitive limitations lie, and then embrace the tools that will help us cope with a future or a present that is now in dissonance with how we're intuitively wired. the reason a world that changes so fast makes less sense to linear humans is because linear humans are used to a linear world. But I think if we unleash our imagination isn't linear, right? The things in our minds and in our dreams have no limits. And we have to start matching our expectations of the real world with the unlimited potential of our imagination. And if we can put those things in congruence, then we won't be so overwhelmed by exponential change anymore. That's my hope and my view. Thanks for your question.
Fantastic. Ignacio Dib is asking, are we living in a simulation?
Everyone loves that question. There's a lot of ways to answer that. Sorry, I just put some ice in my mouth. Okay, so Elon Musk and others have recently repopularized this ancient question of whether we're living in a world that is an illusion or a simulation or a virtual reality. And there are many ways that we can look at how to answer that. You know, in a very real way, yes, of course. The world is a simulation because our brain, which houses our consciousness, is behind 2 inches of skull. Our eyes are not windows for our brains to look out into the world. Our eyes are lenses that take in signals that then are converted to electrical signals that then the brain interprets, like a computer interpreting data from a Netflix signal and then turning it into the image on your television. Our brain is making a movie, a rendering of the world based on signals it interprets electronically. So yes, what we see out in the world is really our matrix created by us. Furthermore, what we notice in the world, how we respond and what we see is also determined by cultural conditioning. You know how they say, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail? Well, that's an example, you know, that in that example, the hammer is a tool in your hand that is now informing your whole fucking perception of the world. If you have a gun, everything looks like a target. So there's all these different elements that can change the simulation and change how we interpret the simulation. So that's one way of answering it. But I think your question is whether some like artificial intelligent computer system out there outside of us is creating a world that we inhabit. And I don't know if there's a way to answer that question. It's certainly possible. Maybe when you die, you really wake up. But I don't think there's any evidence of it, except perhaps for some of the insights in regarding the idea that the primary material of the cosmos is not matter, but actually information. That the more you zoom into the basic substrate of the world, you know, you keep going down to matter and then to atoms, and then you keep going deeper until eventually you arrive at a domain that's just made of information. That there is just process, that there are no nouns, just verbs. And so nothing exists except information. So maybe that's a plausible way of playing with the idea that everything is basically just a simulation or an information rendering, that nothing is actually tactile or real at a fundamental level. So a lot to speculate on there.
Great. Now, Michel Pierre is asking, Jason, you think that one of the primary tactics of enduring winnings is daily learning? What did you do on a daily basis to keep on learning? Did you read many books? If so, which ones do you recommend most?
Yeah, I definitely, I like to read, but I don't think it's the books you read as much as the compulsion that makes you want to pick up the book to begin with. So I would say that the root, the genesis of my voracious hunger for information and for understanding comes from curiosity, just a need to know, you know, a desire and a thirst for understanding. And it's because understanding gives me a lot of pleasure. Carl Sagan, the astronomer, famously said, understanding is a kind of ecstasy. It is ecstatic to understand something for the first time. To connect the dots and see the bigger picture is actually orgasmic in the brain. There was a recent article in bigthink.com about that part of the brain that gets agitated when you grasp a new idea that excites you is similar to orgasm. So there's a kind of cognitive ecstasy or cognitive orgasm from learning. So I think what we all have to do is be on the lookout for what lights us up, right? It's like that Houston Smith quote that says, ask not what the world needs, ask instead what makes you come alive, because what the world needs is more people who have come alive. So stay open.
Great. Now, Josh is asking, what would be your suggestion to the youth of the universe? That how can we stay mentally fit in this pandemic situation?
Look, this pandemic situation was definitely an unprecedented hiccup in our history. And my view is that it's one of the unintended consequences of a globalized world. Not just that globalization made it easier for the virus itself to spread, but that globalization in a networked world also also made it easier for the fear to spread in an irrational manner. I think that the fact that it was a new virus was unsettling because we didn't know what we were dealing with. And so sometimes when human beings face the unfamiliar and the potentially threatening, they assume the worst case scenario. And that's kind of an insurance, right? Because if you assume the worst and then it's not as bad, at least you're alive. But if you assume that it's not so bad and then it's the worst, then you're dead. So I think people got scared and they assumed the worst. But even then, the reactions were so intense because once certain influential people got scared and assumed the worst, that spread through the internet like wildfire and got amplified on the internet even more. And before we knew it, it created a feedback loop, like a snowball effect, where the fear was amplified by the internet, which then amplified the fear, which then was amplified by the internet, which then amplified the fear. And then politicians got caught in it and nobody wanted to be the one that didn't react enough. So everybody tried to react more than the other one. And before we knew it, we shut down the world. And only now are we realizing that maybe that wasn't the right policy. Personally, I'm persuaded that based on the data that I've seen, even in places like Italy, where they've confirmed that over 90% or 91% of the deaths were people with pre-existing conditions and who were older than 65. So maybe the right policy should have just been to protect the elderly, people in nursing homes, and have people maybe do some basic social distancing. But that quarantining the planet was perhaps a horrendous mistake. And that's up for debate. But what at least I see now is that we're coming out on the other side of it. And health minister of Norway and the health minister of Belgium have already declared that if there are new outbreaks, they would not do quarantines again, that there are other ways to mitigate the threat. And so I think that it's unfortunate that we had to go through this, but in a way it's understandable that human beings assumed the worst. However, I also think that we will learn quickly and that we won't make the same mistakes again, and we're going to be better for it. That's what I think, because I'm an optimist. For those of you that have been, trapped indoors for 2 months, you're right. Mental health is a secondary effect of this policy that was not considered. What happens when you rob people of free movement, mobility, and contact for extended periods? That can lead to all kinds of mental distress. And I think only now we're seeing the consequences of it. So my invitation to you is to, practice as much self-care as you can. Try to follow the basic protocols, but go outside, do exercise, do what you need to do to take care of your mind. And we'll get through it. We're already on the other side of it.
Fantastic. Great advice. We have a question from Pamela Brunette, she's asking, what are your thoughts about overcoming failure or to accept a reality that you weren't ready to face?
Well, a lot of motivational speakers will tell us that failure always has something to teach us. And that's a good framing. I think, yes, failure has something to teach us. That doesn't mean we have to pretend that failure doesn't hurt, or that failure isn't disappointing, or that failure shouldn't make us, doubt ourselves or the path that we took. But I also think that failure can double our resolve. Just like an airplane takes off against the wind, sometimes we need resistance in order to fly. And so if you're able to hold both things in mind at once, if you're able to acknowledge that, yes, failure is disappointing, but that failure doesn't mean the end of you, that failure closes one door but opens another, then I think it equips you with the capacity to metabolize what is most difficult about failure, but ultimately to come out of it stronger.
Fantastic. Okay, Noor is asking, what are the concerns about biotechnology regarding biodiversity and human health?
Well, I guess the concerns with regards to human health is that biotechnology also means that somebody could synthesize a biological weapon. Same way you could program your genetics to cure cancer, you could program your genes to live longer. Somebody could also create a biological pathogen made of genes that could hurt people. And in fact, one of the rumors around COVID-19 was that it was made in a Chinese lab. Most experts have dismissed that as just a conspiracy theory, but the plausibility of it is still there. The idea that something in a lab could be designed to hurt humans. So that's a genuine concern. But that's always been a concern with all technology. Fire, when we harnessed fire, we could cook food for the first time. And without that, human beings would have never progressed. At the same time, fire can be weaponized and you can burn the village. Language can be used to encode all of human knowledge and pass it down. But language can also be used for hate speech propaganda. Social media gives everyone a voice, but social media can also lead to fake news. So technology has two sides, it always has. And so really it's up to us to steer it in the right direction.
Great. Well, we're still having a lot of questions, but we are reaching the end of this wonderful session. It has been exciting and very helpful. I'm sure that, all the comments, all the remarks so far has been with very positive energy and everyone's super happy.
I'm so glad.
We missed one video. I'm not sure if the one of awe. But
well, I got to I felt like I had shared the gist of my presentation, and I knew I was at 45 minutes, so I didn't think it was necessarily. But
okay.
If you want to close the session and just leave them with that video, you can.
Cool.
It's a beautiful video about the overarching theme or feeling I want to leave you with, which is the feeling of awe. Awe in Spanish, el asombro, because awe is what we feel when we find something or encounter something that is bigger than our maps of what's possible. So we have these maps, these ideas of what's possible. And then when we encounter something bigger than those maps, we feel awe. And my invitation is for you guys to feel awe today. And this last video is all about what awe feels like and why it's good for you. And it's a nice perfume to leave you with. So I will say goodbye before Eddie plays the video. So much love for you guys. Thank you for your attention. This video will live on Facebook, so you guys can enjoy it again. And here's the last video on awe.
I think a lot about the contrast between banality and wonder, between disengagement and radiant ecstasy, between being unaffected by the here and now and being absolutely ravished emotionally by it. And I think one of the problems for human beings is mental habits. Once we create a comfort zone, we rarely step outside of that comfort zone. But the consequence of that is a phenomenon known as hedonic adaptation. Overstimulation to the same kind of thing, the same stimuli again and again and again, renders said stimuli invisible. Your brain has already mapped it in its own head, and you no longer literally have to be engaged by that. We have eyes yet see not, ears that hear not, and hearts that neither feel nor understand. There's a great book called The Wondering Brain that says that one of the ways that we elicit wonder is by scrambling the self temporarily so that the world can seep in. You know, Henry Miller says even a blade of grass, when given proper attention, becomes an infinitely magnificent world in itself, you know. Darwin said attention, if sudden and close, graduates into surprise, and this into astonishment, and this into stupefied amazement. That's what rapture is. That's what illumination is. That's what that sort of infinite comprehending awe that human beings love so much. And so how do we do that? How do we mess with our perceptual apparatus in order to have the kind of emotional and aesthetic experience from life that we render most meaningful? Because we all know those moments are there. Those are the moments that would make Final Cut. Only in these moments we experience afresh the hardly bearable ecstasy of direct energy exploding on our nerve endings. This is the rhapsodic, ecstatic bursting forth of awe that expands our perceptual parameters beyond all previous limits, and we literally have to reconfigure our mental models of the world in order to assimilate the beauty of that download. That is what it means to be inspired. The Greek root of the term means to breathe in, to take it in. We fit the universe through our brains and it comes out in the form of nothing less than poetry. We have a responsibility to awe.
Great. Well, before we end, I just want to make a comment. Let me unmute you. Has to be on mute. I think. Okay. So before we finish, I just wanted to send a message to all our students and our school community by reinforcing the importance of education. All that we have learned today, everything that Jason has been eloquently and clearly pointing out during this wonderful conference, is the conclusion is we need to continue our education. We need to move forward. I mean, overcoming your fears in times of COVID-19 allows you to open your mind to a learning path that may help you achieve your dreamed endeavors. So assuming all this technological advancements, all this exponential change that we're facing, the online education, it's a tool to move forward, a tool to keep on building your education. Thank you very much, Jason. You have been amazing, amazing. It has been fun, thrilling, and I wanted to thank you on behalf of Geneva Business School, our school community. Everyone had a wonderful time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.